Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk About It with topics and guests from near and far. I am your host, January McKay. Thank you for tuning in. Today's show is one about bravery and sacrifices. My guests are Ms. Jody Wildy, who is a candidate for president of the Prince George's County NAACP and business owner, along with Mr. Rafael Ocasio, a retired U.S. Navy veteran and agency and organizational procurement coordinator for Veterans Health Administration. I will be right back with our guests.
Ever hear the one about the frog? Put a frog in a pot of boiling water and it'll jump right out.
Here's my resume.
But put a frog in a pot of cool water and slowly heat it up, and that frog will boil. It's a lie. But as a metaphor for us and all that we go through as veterans,
Any real-world experience.
it's a story that rings true. We make excuses for how we feel. We push everything down. We tell ourselves the lie that it's easier to stay in that boiling water, to disconnect. And some days, maybe, it is. But you've never been interested in easy. Reaching out is hard. Do it anyway. You're not alone. You've got this. You are not a frog.
Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk About It, bringing topics and guests from near and far. My guests today are Ms. Jody Wildy, a business owner and a candidate for president of the Prince George's County NAACP. She is currently an active member of the NAACP, which she joined 33 years ago. While working with the NAACP President's Committee on Persons with Disabilities during her tenure, she held the position of First Vice President and Membership and Outreach Coordinator. She has lived in Prince George's County for over 26 years. Ms. Wildy is a subject matter expert in the area of diversity and inclusion, where she worked several federal government agencies conducting workshops and speaking engagements, to name a few. Ms. Wildy holds a bachelor's degree in nutrition from Howard University, in addition to holding a diversity and inclusion certificate from Georgetown University, a master's degree in business management and public administration from Central Michigan University. She's a member of several organizations, including Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Mr. Rafael Ocasio, born in Puerto Rico, migrated to the Bronx, New York, and joined the Navy and retired from the United States Navy. Mr. Ocasio has worked as a social worker for Virginia Beach Department of Social Services and a Spanish teacher for Queen Anne Collegiate School. He is currently an agency and organization procurement coordinator for the Veterans Health Administration. Mr. Ocasio holds an associate's degree in science and Bachelor of Arts degree in social sciences, along with a master's degree in social work. He has volunteered with many organizations, serving as president of his Homeowners Association. Welcome, Ms. Wildy and Mr. Ocasio, to Let's Talk About It. Thank you for joining me. Your bravery is fascinating because neither of you have let your disabilities stop you from success. So let's talk about it. Ms. Wildy, can you please provide a little background on how you acquired your disability and how long has it been?
My accident was approximately 33 years ago. I was coming home from having a good time out, let's say, and I was helping a stranded motorist, and come to find out she had a flat tire. So while I was in the back of my car getting my jack out and my cousin, a car hit me, and several cars hit us after that. My cousin was thrown on the side, and I was thrown up under my car. So from that point on, I became a bilateral above the knee amputee.
How did you feel at the time of your injury?
I didn't know how to feel, to be quite honest, because at the time they had me under some serious morphine, let's say, and I didn't know what to expect at that time, because prior to that, I walked, and my whole life just changed at that particular moment. And one of the most disturbing things at that time was I could no longer walk into my mother's house that I had walked in for 34 years. So my life really just changed, and I found myself in a wheelchair. And unfortunately, even with that, I left the hospital without a wheelchair, or let me say, I didn't have any idea of how I was going to get out the hospital, because at that time I wasn't able to acquire a wheelchair. So finally someone gave me a wheelchair, and I ended up going home, but I had to have assistance. So I could have felt really bad, but I tried to adjust as much as I could.
Thank you. Mr. Ocasio, would you answer the same question for us, please?
Sure. When I was fine when I was first diagnosed in 1996. It came gradually, but I have multiple sclerosis, and as the disease progresses, you basically lose part of your ability to. In my case, my ability to walk, because my sclerosis is in my lower back. When I first was diagnosed, I didn't think much about it, because I just thought maybe the doctors could fix it. And the other concern I had was who's going to take care of my family. I had a new son and a wife and a mortgage. So, that was more on my mind than my disability.
Thank you. Can both of you explain the impact this injury has had on your life and how you were able to move forward?
Well, it always has an impact when, things change. And it's just a matter of how you're going to adjust to that change. Was it difficult? Yes, but if you keep a positive attitude and you feel as though I can move forward from this, it's going to be different. But, it just depends on, where your mental state is. I never let it get me down. I never asked why, but I just knew that I had to continue on with my life. But I did spend a lot of time fighting, trying to get services, and, how I was going to maneuver around the house and maneuver around the city. In fact, I ended up moving home with my mother, but she had 14 steps. So it was, how am I going to get up those steps? How am I going to get into bed? How am I going to bathe myself when you're all accustomed to being independent and doing those things yourself? So it was quite an adjustment, trying to get accustomed to having a disability and not feeling like you were burdening anyone.
Thank you. Mr. Ocasio?
Well, I didn't think much about I did think about a lot about the adjustment, but I was thinking in terms of how can I keep forward with my life. So when I requested a special wheelchair, I also requested a racquetball chair, because I used to play a lot of racquetball. I spent a lot of time at the gym. I had the vehicles modified. Fortunately for me, being a veteran, the VA picked me up, and the VA has a lot of resources for veterans. So, I just basically kept on moving. I think what made me overcome this better than others is that I had the desire to, provide for my family, which was my priority.
Thank you. We're going to take a break right now, and we will be right back with you shortly.
People with disabilities need their space.
Sorry, I'll be quick.
A workplace within reach. And help only when it's asked for.
Here, let me.
I'm all set. Thank you. After all, everyone should receive the same respect and consideration. Brought to you by the United Spinal Association. Download our disability etiquette booklet at unitedspinal.org.
When you look at the number of disasters in the U.S., chances are every area will deal with some kind of emergency in the next decade. And between school, sports, and social lives, chances are you won't be with your kids when it happens. Will they know what to do? Ready.gov/kids has the educational tools and information to make the conversation easy. When the time comes, chances are they'll feel prepared, not scared. So talk with your family today.
Thank you, and welcome back to our show, Let's Talk About It. So, Ms. Wildy and Mr. Ocasio, both of you talked about your family. What was it like having their support, and how did your incident impact their lives? How important was it to have them play a role in your recovery?
For me, it was very interesting because I lived in a row house at the time, and my family decided that I could no longer stay there. So they were even talking about selling my house. And I basically, I don't want to say I was ever in a stupor, but I woke up at that point and said, they're trying to sell my house and dictate my life. So I had to put a stop to that. But they were very supportive, very supportive. If I needed anything, they would drive me to a destination, to my doctor's appointments. So, other than them trying to sell the house, I didn't really have much of an issue, except for, I spent a lot of time in the bed at the time. And I heard at that time, everybody's issues, because they knew that I was stationary and couldn't go anywhere. So if they had a problem, I was the therapist, let's say, for them at that time, because I couldn't go anywhere. They had an ear. But other than that, again, they were very, very supportive of me. And I'm grateful for that.
Thank you. Mr. Ocasio?
Well, at the time of my diagnosis, and I was gradually declining, I was living down in Norfolk, Virginia with my wife and my son. Her family's up here from Maryland, and my family's up in New York. So basically, my wife was my support. She's a nurse, so we had to adjust our schedules so that she would, she worked more because the income would go down, because I wouldn't be working. Well, the Navy wasn't paying me like I was going to get paid, since I was no longer in the Navy. But that was basically it. I remember that I did spend a lot of time at home with my son. So for the first year of his life, I was Mr. Mom. And that was kind of like good, because it kept my mind occupied. So the focus was the baby and not me. And, and that's how I dealt with it. But on the other hand, the extended family, my mom, her family, they were really supportive.
Thank you. So tell us what it's like in Prince George's County in terms of accessibility with the transportation.
Well, I don't have much of a problem with the transportation, because I do have an accessible van, and I'm very capable of getting around on my own. But I do understand that there are, some issues with paratransit. I've never experienced those issues, but again, the only problem I have is that sometimes they don't have enough signs or spaces for people who have disabilities and they drive themselves. But other than that, I've never had an issue with it. But if I did, I would say that it was because I live about a quarter of a mile from the main street. So if I was to take paratransit or anything like that, it would be very difficult because I'd have to either drive there or use my wheelchair to get there. So I think that they could probably do a little better.
Did you receive support, financial support from the county or the state to purchase your own vehicle?
Actually, I did. My first vehicle, Vocational Rehabilitation Services, bought it for me because as long as you're employed or you want to be employed, they, basically they paid for the modifications. They didn't pay for the van, but because I was in their program and wanted to go back to work, they provided the transportation for that to happen.
That's great to know. Thank you. Mr. Ocasio?
Well, I've never had any issues with transportation because the VA also provided some income we purchased a van and they provided some of the income for that, but they do modify the vehicles for me. I'm allowed 2 vehicles to be modified and the VA incurs the whole cost. In Prince George's County. But here's something off subject is people using the handicap bathroom. That's what really irks me. I want to put that out. Let people know, please use the other stalls before you use a handicap stall. Thank you.
Especially at the airports, it's horrible.
Oh, I cuss them out.
And those ones that have that, I'll be in the handicap space just for a second.
Yeah.
Mm,
And that's when you come along.
thank you for making that PSA. All right, Ms. Wildey, tell us how your life is now as you're living with a disability in contrast to when you weren't.
Actually, I have a great life, because I think because of my positive attitude and the supports that I've had, my life outside of the beginning when the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, was first instituted, there was some concern because everything hadn't been done there. A lot of the restaurants and stuff weren't accessible. So I actually ended up getting a job working with the District of Columbia in the ADA office. And what we would do is go around and make certain that things were accessible. But in that interim, I was able to work with President Clinton staff on modifying the inauguration for him. And also I was fortunate enough to be able to help make Camden Yards accessible. So, with that stuff right there, I am grateful and thankful that my life it's changed, but it hasn't changed because I'm the same person that I was, before I had my accident. And the only difference is I use a power chair to get from A to Z faster than I could ever have walked.
And your life has changed and it has allowed the change in others' lives by you being so instrumental in helping with Camden Yards and inauguration events, the design of those. So that's great. Mr. Ocasio, would you answer the same question for us?
My life is actually, before I became disabled, I wasn't that successful. I basically, was a normal guy. I enjoyed going to the gym and that was basically it. My wife was my motivator. She says, you need to do something else. But once I became disabled and I didn't have the option of using my body like I used to, I started, the VA said, well, you can take this test and it'll tell you what you'd be good at. And one of the things I came up with social worker. But hindsight, I know that I've always been community oriented. Even as a child growing up in New York, I was always at the community center and doing things around, doing stuff like that, teaching kids after school programs and so forth. So it kind of fell into place. And after my disability, I got the studies, so I became a little more successful. I haven't had, I guess I could say I'm more fortunate than a lot of people, since my disability. So I'm kind of don't look at disability as such a bad thing. And, and then it's how you perceive it. Another thing that I'm aware of is that when I worked for the VA at the spinal cord department, they would call me when they had a veteran who had issues because there's a stigma behind having a wheelchair. So they had a veteran who was having a real hard time with a walker and really needed a wheelchair. They would call me and say, hey, we'd like for you to come and talk to this veteran and give him a different perspective. So I used to go, I was the spokesperson for the wheelchairs, I could say, and I would tell them, listen, there's no different. A wheelchair is just going to allow you to do more things than you actually do, because your hands are really occupied when you have a walker, and and you're more liable to fall. I tell them, I can get drunk and not fall. Anyway.
What a motivator.
Okay.
Wow. Can either of you tell us about any opportunities or programs available for those living with disabilities to help start a business?
I never utilized any. I know that at one time they were offering, training for individuals with disabilities, entrepreneurship opportunities, but I never took advantage of it. I just utilized the skills that I had prior to my disability and utilized those. So I don't know of any at this particular time, but I would not be surprised that there are some out there that are directed totally towards persons with disabilities.
Mr. Ocasio, did you have any that you wanted to share? Or
Yes.
no?
Well, as a veteran, the Veterans Department has a really good program. They have a small business program that you can sign up for and take the courses. And it's pretty intensive and it's pretty informative. And they teach you and help you to get, if you're a veteran, to get into business. And they even have a program where if you're a veteran and you're a disabled veteran who has a business, you can, the VA will use your services and you'll have a priority over other vendors. So then the VA has a pretty good program. And even if you're not disabled, for example, my wife even took the VA program to learn about business and stuff like that. Because she's dibble dabbling, she's getting her doctorate, but she's also thinking about opening up her own business. And some of the people that she worked with, they have clinics and they want to hire her as a contractor. So she's pretty much incorporating her profession with the ability to run and own a business.
And if I might add, one thing, the federal government does have a program where they want people or HR departments to hire persons with disabilities. So if you have a disability and you have the skills, sometimes you're put close to the top of the list under veterans though, but they do have a program for persons with disabilities if you want to become employed.
Can you tell us about your plans for the future and any words of inspiration you might have for any persons who are disabled or newly disabled?
Well, I would say my plans for the future are to, one, as you mentioned earlier, is the run for president of the Prince George's County NAACP. In addition to, I have an art gallery that I'm interested in opening up. And my words of inspiration to anyone, even with me doing this, is, you just got to stay strong and you got to persevere, and sky's the limit, regardless of whether you have a disability or not.
Okay. Yeah. My plans are to retire for the second time. And one of what I have to say to people that have a disability or dealing with the new disability is, remember that you have a disability. The disability does not have you.
Mhm.
You can proceed with your life. You just have to make some adjustments and, and just keep moving forward and thinking positive.
you both so much for being on our show and for your inspiring words. You've proved that your disability doesn't limit your ability to be successful, active, and engaged. Mr. Ocasio, thank you for your service to our country, and we honor you, we appreciate you, and we recognize you as someone who has served to protect our freedom. Thank you so much again, and this ends the segment of our show, Let's Talk About It. Let's Talk About It is here to communicate, educate, motivate, uplift, and inspire people all over the world. I am January McKay. See you next time on Let's Talk About It.
Just trying to keep things running for those who rely on us. That's why we don't have time to be sick with the flu.
We don't have time for delays.
We don't have time for spills.
Next.
We don't have time for setbacks. Let's be real.
Getting the flu shot
helps you fight the flu.
Get a flu shot for yourself and those around you too.
If you need to do something to feel okay to drive, you're not okay to drive. Don't drive buzzed.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move, so I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me. Jason, let's go see your room.
What do you think? We kept it a little spare, so you can decorate it how you like.
Dinner!
Go. Excellent. Soccer is fun. Yeah, I saw you guys out there. We're the